as we get into the spring, we're getting closer and closer to tax time, which means many of you may be working with a tax preparer or working yourself to get your taxes ready to send to the IRS and to the state of Michigan. But with opportunities to take care of your taxes with other people helping you out, there's also opportunities for scammers to take advantage of people across our communities. Here to help us navigate around potential scams during tax season is Nakia Mills, the Director of Marketing for the Better Business Bureau of Detroit and Eastern Michigan. Nakia, thank you for being with us.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show because this is an important time of the year for people. They're getting all their information together. They're dotting their I's. They're crossing their T's. They're working potentially with tax preparers for critical information and with that, a lot of really personal information that's going to be out and about this time of the year to make sure that they're able to file their taxes. With that, we have scam artists that are always looking for the best opportunities at the best time. So when we get to tax time, Nakia, what are some of those common ways we see scammers start to target tax preparers and individual tax filers?
The truth is, they kind of switch it up every year, but we see the same themes, just, they reinvent themselves with a new twist. So scammers do that, right? One of the top ones, as we all know, people like to try to impersonate the IRS. So you might get a phone call or a letter saying that, oh, you have this refund, but we can't give it to you until we get your personal information. So beware of those because once you give that personal information, you discover there is no extra refund. They just are trying to get your information so they can steal your money or possibly pretend to be you and file taxes if you haven't filed them already. So that's one of the big ones. And then there's, of course, tax ID theft, which is why we tell everyone file early as you can. Because some scammers, if they somehow already got a hold of your social security number, will file taxes and then they get your refund. So then when you file, you get a letter from the IRS saying, hey, this number has already been filed under the social security number. So those are two of the big ones. And then, of course, there's phishing, right? We all know the phony emails where it's a bogus website that they get you to click on saying maybe, oh, you e-filed, but we need you to update your information. Just click this link. Those are kind of the biggest ways. And then, of course, there's the threatening. If you owe the IRS and you're not expecting your refund, you might get the call from an impersonator, even threatening you with jail if you don't pay them on the spot during that phone call.
And these scammers that, particularly those that are targeting people with unsolicited communications, those threatening phone calls, like you said, threatening jail time or saying you have a fine you have to pay and you have to pay it right now or we're coming to get you.
Exactly.
They often take a couple of tactics that should immediately be red flags, particularly some of the ways they're trying to collect those funds.
Yes, there one thing you'll notice, the real IRS isn't going to force you on the spot at this moment, or we're sending, the FBI or cop to your door. So that's a real red flag. As soon as you hear that pressure that, oh, you must do it right now, or it's some excessive threat that doesn't even seem realistic. And then there's also, just pay attention to on websites or in person, grammar, and how are you being contacted? The IRS is not contacting you through text. They're not going to contact you through social media. They're not asking for personal information over the phone. So just be very careful and think about this type of communication. Is the IRS really going to try to reach me this way?
Yeah, it's all different things to consider, and there's so much great information out there for people in our communities to avoid these sorts of scams and so many others. If you're looking for information that's helpful during tax season or really any time of the year, or just to keep up to date on how scam artists are navigating, bbb.org is the website for the Better Business Bureau, and then you can navigate even to their Detroit page through their website for Detroit and Eastern Michigan, which is where we're being joined today from Nakia Mills, Director of Marketing marketing for the Better Business Bureau of Detroit and Eastern Michigan on the Splash Live. And also a lot of people this time of the year, as they're filing their taxes, maybe they're doing it alone themselves, and that takes a lot of, like you would be doing with a tax preparer anyway, collecting a lot of documents, and those documents have your personal information on it, bank account information, student loan information, your social security number, maybe even other information like insurance. And so as you're sending those documents in, as you're preparing those documents to fill out those papers, what should you be doing with those documents that have all that personal information on it afterwards to dispose of it properly and protect your personal information in that way?
Why you said that word. Some of us lately, we don't safeguard our social security information. That number is so vital. So you said the right word, protect that information, shred it completely. Don't think, oh, I'm just going to crumble it up and smash it in my trash. You should use a real shredder, get that information put away. You don't want anyone to access those details. And I would add to, just because we do offer tips for people, we have a special site just dedicated to taxes at bbb.org/tax tips. And that information not only helps you learn about the scams, it gives you a lot more tools to avoid being scammed.
That's bbb.org/tax tips for more information. They'll have resources from all throughout the U.S. for filing your taxes and preparing for potential tax scams this time of the year, including an article that's right at the top of that page, Tips to Protect Yourself from Tax Scams, great ways to get information that you may need. And Nakia, also this time of the year, as we're talking about protecting that personal information, so many people, they don't want to go through the exhaustion of crunching the numbers and doing all the calculations and filling out the tax form, so they may use an expert or a tax preparer in order to help them with the process. But that comes with its own challenges and its own risks as well. So as people are looking for a tax preparer, or they're getting that information prepared to bring to an accountant, what should they be looking for? What should they be looking out for as they prepare to align with a tax preparer?
Right. That's something you have to be very careful in research, right? Because sometimes our friend might tell us that they know this person who does taxes and they can get you this great refund and they have this great price, but you have to be very careful. Make sure you're doing your research. Look them up on bbb.org in our directory. What are people saying? Search their name in general, just Google. Look on social media. Are people posting saying this person took their money and they never got a refund or their taxes weren't filed? Definitely make sure you do your research, search that name everywhere you can, especially if it's an individual and not part of an organization. I'm not saying all individual CPAs or tax accountants are bad, but you definitely want to do your research if it's a company or an individual by just looking them up in different channels to make sure there's no negative information out there about them.
And are there any sort of certifications or accreditations that people should be looking for also that may help them to navigate and weed out some of the potential bad actors?
It's kind of the same, similar, those red flags where if you feel like something might be too good to be true, they maybe are those types that are always promising a refund, right? All of us aren't always going to get a refund. So just be very careful if it's those kind that are, hey, just give us your money up front and we'll get you this huge refund, or we'll give you some money. Just be careful because sometimes they'll try to reel you in because they really want your personal information more than they really plan to file your taxes for you. Sometimes people can get a fake tax preparer and they feed them all this information and then the tax preparer disappears. So just pretty much when you have that gut feeling, go with it. A lot of times it's just that simple. And so long as you do your research, and then if you hear your brain telling you be careful, listen to your brain.
And it's always best to err on the side of caution, especially when it comes to your personal information. And Nakia, as you're joining us from the Better Business Bureau, Nakia Mills, the Director of Marketing for the BBB of Detroit and Eastern Michigan, with us on the Splash Live. That's especially the case nowadays, where whether you're using a tax preparer's services, a CPA's services, or you're doing your taxes yourself, in many cases, a lot of this can and often is done online, which adds its own security risks too. What considerations should people be making as they're maybe preparing or filing their taxes on the web?
Huge. You want to make sure it's the real website. We all know people now make these fake websites. They can steal that IRS logo, or maybe, a tax preparer. I won't say any names, but a popular tax preparer's logo, and make the site look just like that. And then you're typing your information into a fake site. So always look in the address bar and make sure when you click a link, because we might search, tax preparer online or even irs.gov, right? But sometimes people know how to hijack those links. And then when you click on it, you end up on their website. So make sure that address bar says you are where you thought you were supposed to end up. And then even once you're on that site, look for grammar. A lot of times, these fraudsters have poor grammar. Sometimes they're not even from the US when they're doing these things. So, a telltale sign, a lot of times, you can tell that something's not quite right because the government isn't using all these grammatically incorrect statements and a lot of pressure statements kind of rush you through the process to get you to enter your information. So those are some red flags when you're looking online. And make sure it's always secure. The real sites are going to have the HTTPS showing that it's a secure website.
Yeah, that's all great information that you can find online at bbb.org/tax tips for more information on keeping yourself protected during tax preparation season. Of course, we know tax day coming up on April 15th, but so much time, energy, and a lot of personal information goes into that. Always important to keep up to date. Oakland County also on Facebook on their page at OakGov, providing some additional tips that lead to resources very similar to what was provided by the Better Business Bureau. All great places to go for information this time of the year as we're getting ready to file our taxes with the IRS and with the state of Michigan. Joining us on the Splash Live is Nakia Mills, the Director of Marketing at the Better Business Bureau of Detroit and Southeastern Michigan. Nakia, before we let you go, any lasting advice that we haven't discussed yet today that would be important for people to keep in their mind and consider as they're getting ready to put their taxes in?
Not even so much as they're getting ready. I feel like we covered those pretty securely, but I do want to point out to people because they freak out if they do think their identity has been stolen, if they do think they're a victim of tax fraud. The most important thing you can do is first put a fraud alert on your credit report, because this means someone has your social security number. I'm sorry. So make sure that you go to either one of the three: Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. If you put that fraud alert on one account, the other two will also add that fraud alert to their service as well. So that's very important for people to know, because we don't want you to think if something does happen, we want to make sure you know what to do next. And you should also make sure you contact the FTC. That's just at ftc.gov/complaints. And also report it, with us on bbb.org/scam tracker. So hopefully people can understand what happened so that it doesn't happen to them.
Yeah, there are resources out there if you do notice that your identity has been stolen. I'm someone that has been through that process before, and one of those red flags that proved that to me was getting a letter back from the IRS, actually getting a tax return early when I had not filed taxes yet at all. And so taking those steps can be really important, as Nakia said, in order to protect yourself. If you do get a notice like that starts putting alarm bells off, there are protections that are in place, and a lot of those protections you can put in place before you would even potentially fall victim. Nakia, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.